Good morning out there in streaming land. Thank you for joining us. You are tuned in to the TED Manila Information Show, or TMI show for short, because we do bring you way too much information. I am the M of the TMI, Manila Chan. That over there's the T, the
Where's
TED
the
Rall.
I? Who's the I?
It's the info.
There is no I in TMI. Well, actually, there is.
Well, yeah, that's very confusing. But it is a lot of information. And we might confuse you with the plethora of information we provide, because sometimes it's not attached to anything and we're just giving you information on stuff you never asked for. We're live Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern time, so please be sure to like and follow this show. Today's main topic, we'll be talking with an immigration attorney, my friend Allen Orr, a longtime guest if you've watched any of my shows on RT. And he's literally an expert in this field. So we'll ask him stuff like, oh, I don't know, are immigrants, whatever, if they have papers or not, are they afforded constitutional first right amendments to speech? Stuff like that. Or can you deport American citizens? Because that's a topic, Ted. That's
well,
that's a thing.
President Trump says he wants to.
Yeah, so that's literally a thing that I think we should cover with somebody that does this for a living, because Alan would know. But before we get to that, we'll do at least one story, I think, of international news that I'm personally happy about, Ted. So we'll go over to the UK.
Okay.
And do that. I'm glad somebody somewhere, a court somewhere in the Western world, has got some marbles left. So
we may be arguing.
Up to it.
But that's okay.
Yes, that's okay though. Okay, let's get to that before the guest pops on.
Okay, the Supreme Court in the UK has ruled that trans women do not fall within the legal definition of women under the country's equality laws. The new judgment, which said that the
we have a
legal...
soundbite.
Oh,
We have a
right,
soundbite.
good
So
point.
we'll hear from the judge.
All right, let's hear
We'll hear
it.
from the judge. Let's add him to the stage there. I guess I don't know how many judges. I don't know, like their version of SCOTUS. I don't know how many there are, but this is the justice or judge. I don't know if they're called that over there. Ted.
Where's his wig?
I know. I thought they'd be in the formal, powdered wigs and robes, but Ted, they look like normal people in suits and ties.
Albeit slightly pinched.
What?
He has a pinched face. That guy.
Pinched face?
Yeah, you've heard that expression. He has a pinched face.
Little kind of
Who. It's sort of like.
He's kind of like a Who from Whoville.
Really? I mean, yeah, maybe a little bit. All right.
A little bit. It's a little on the nose. Okay.
Not an ugly guy.
That's what he says.
Not a good looking guy. Yeah.
But he looks.
If I saw him dead on a subway train, I'd walk right by.
Oh, Ted. I kind of do wish they were wearing powdered wigs and robes. I'm just saying.
The central question on this appeal is the meaning of the terms woman and sex in the Equality Act 2010. Do those terms refer to biological women or biological sex? Or is a woman to be interpreted as extending to a trans woman with a gender recognition certificate? By that I mean a person born male who now possesses a gender recognition certificate amending her gender to female, and sex to be interpreted as including what I will refer to as certificated sex. The unanimous decision of this court is that the terms woman and sex in the Equality Act 2010 refer to a biological woman and biological sex. But we counsel against reading this judgment as a triumph of one or more groups in our society at the expense of another. It is not. As I shall explain later in this hand-down speech, the Equality Act 2010 gives transgender people protection not only against discrimination through the protected characteristic of gender reassignment, but also against direct discrimination, indirect discrimination, and harassment in substance in their acquired gender.
All right. So you heard the ruling there. It was a unanimous court ruling over in the UK. I think I thought I saw, Ted, I guess there's not that many of them. So, okay, that's what their Supreme Court looks like. I'm not impressed. So if you want to finish reading, telling us, what the summary of what just happened, there's 4 judges there, I guess, the panel. So if you want to finish
Interestingly, yeah, this has something to do with Scotland, I guess. But anyway, which is, of course, part of the UK. The judgment, which said that the legal definition of a woman is based on biological sex, is a blow to campaigners for transgender rights. It could have far-reaching implications for how the law is applied in Britain to single-sex spaces like bathrooms, equal pay claims, and maternity policies. This follows a years-long legal battle over whether trans women can be regarded as female under the Equality Act of 2010 in the UK, which aims to prevent discrimination, and it comes amid intense and bitter public debate over the intersection of transgender rights and women's rights. Announcing the decision, well, we've already heard that, so I don't need to reread what he said.
Lord Hodge, though.
Lord
I
Hodge.
love that he's called Lord Hodge.
Lord Hodge, yes. So basically what this whole case comes down to is the difference between sex and gender, which I think is confusing to a lot of Americans. It hasn't... I would say the transgender rights movement, there's probably been no major equality movement that has succeeded quite as quickly. If you think about like the struggle for women's rights or racial equality or gay rights, those things took a lot longer. I mean, compared to where, basically transgender rights were nowhere 20 years ago. And now look at where we are. Women, centuries before they got the vote, right? So it's like, it's totally like, in this country, right?
Yeah.
So, it's just basically, but this movement has not been good at explaining the difference between sex and gender, or really communicating in general to, people who are cisgendered or whatever. Most Americans are very confused by all this, and there hasn't been like the gay rights movement was far more effective at communicating to straights about who they were and what they needed and wanted from society than trans people have been at communicating to non-trans people about, these differences and so on. So I think this case, it does provide some clarity about the difference between sex and gender, but probably, an education program would be useful.
Oh, well, so here's why this was a blow to the ruling party in Scotland. Is the SNP is the ruling party, and they are the biggest proponents of all of this trans ideology stuff, and they were the ones that started passing rules. And in fact, they were trying to bring charges on J.K. Rowling, the Harry Potter author, who is often described as like vehemently super feminist, to where the trans community would label her as a TERF.
Yes, trans exclusionary radical feminist.
Yes, TER.
I think she might be a TE, but I'm not. No, I don't know if she's a RUF. I don't see any evidence that she's a radical feminist. But
but that's the point.
She's definitely trans exclusionary.
Exclusionary. So she's pro woman in that I might kind of fall into that space as well, is that because I don't believe biological boys should be playing girls' sports. And we know what producer Robbie thinks, because he's smiling and laughing this whole time. So I think, to me, this ruling, for me,
it's really no easy answers,
good.
Though, right? Okay, so like if
you're a
trans woman, for example, okay, I understand how that can creep out. Like, if a 6 foot, like if I became trans, I'm 6'2".
Dude, if you put on a
225 pounds,
and
right? And if my 6'2", 225 pound ass walks into a ladies' room, and I'm all transed out, it's still going to be with like the best boobs ever. It's still going to freak out the ladies in there. But on the other hand, I'm not going to feel safe walking into the guys' room either, all transed out. So, so that's an issue. And really, society doesn't have good answers for this. Also, if I'm that same dude, or I should say the same woman, trans woman, and I walk in and I want to compete in like women's sports, it's not fair to
I'm not going to,
because I'm obviously an athletic stud. And like I'm
not going to compete
any
with
woman.
You, Ted. Like if we're doing a swimming competition, I can't compete with you.
No, of course not. They call me the human fish. But
you've got webbed feet, though. That's the thing.
Right.
People viewers don't know. They can't.
I'm the Michael Phelps of Manhattan. People don't know that because it's not true.
Yeah, but Ted, you're only
but the point is,
no one sees that you have webbed feet.
That's the point is that, like, obviously, yeah. So,
gender aside.
On the other hand, again, should I be with the dudes in the dudes' locker room? I would feel uncomfortable. There's no good answer here. I really don't know the answer.
Well, to this judge's point, he said this is not. Their ruling was not meant to be. It's not about defining what's not protected or protected under.
It's not
the
about defining
law.
gender. It's about defining sex.
It's defining sex, and I think sex is it's a scientific term. And yes, will there be some downhill consequences or other things that'll be kind of tagged on to this society, based on society, and they have something to point at as precedent in the UK. But I think this is a good thing. I'm waiting to see J.K. Rowling, who's literally been at the forefront of this, because she has more money than God, right? Like, she just doesn't care. She's like, bring it. I will fight you in court. Like, this is how I define a woman. This is how I define a man.
We will fight on land. We will fight in the seas.
She will fight.
We will fight in the unisex bathroom. We will fight in the girls' locker room.
She'll fight everybody. She's loaded. So, I think this was precedent setting. And I think it was about time that a Western so-called democracy finally stepped in and did something that made sense. Because as it's now shown, because it's okay to show it now that Trump's in power here, the majority of Americans, and by majority, I mean a slim majority of I don't know, 55 or 60% or something, but still a majority of Americans believe boys should not play in girls' sports, and girls are born.
But we're not talking
with a
about
certain
boys
set of
playing in
parts.
girls' sports. We're talking about trans women.
But this is and that's where the downhill consequences are.
That's what we're talking about.
That's the downhill consequence. But in the UK, they are already jailing people and fining people, scooping you up out of your house because you misgendered somebody online, because you misgendered somebody on social media. They're literally scooping people up and putting them in prison for misgendering. So now I feel like this ruling will actually give precedent for those people to have, well, they don't have a constitution in the UK, but they have some laws around freedom of speech-ish, right? They're freedom of speech-ish laws. And now I feel like those people are vindicated if they want, even if they're being mean to malign and misgender people on purpose just to be mean, so what? I think this allows them the precedent for it. And I think it was about time that there was some common sense prevailing somewhere in some Western society to say, okay, if you were born with, a twig and berries, you're biologically male. That's it. Like
one little correction I just want to say. There is not the same kind of constitution that we have, but they do have a constitution. They have a Bill of Rights that was passed in 1869. Well, they did, and they have a central core group of laws that are considered their constitution when everything's put together, and that the Supreme Court, looks at when they're considering the constitutionality of a.
Robbie's champing at the bit, and I know you say chomping at the bit. I'll let Robbie in here for just a second before the guest pops on. Robbie, yes.
Ted, you're completely off the reservation, brother. I mean, you're talking about, if you get all dolled up, put on some lipstick, throw on a wig, you ain't got a place to go. Dude, let me tell you where you can go. You have a schlong. You go to the men's room. You stand to pee. I mean, there is no middle ground here.
I do.
You're a dude. You can put on a dress. And you can go and cosplay that you're some chick all you want. It does not change the fact that you are a guy. There is no such thing as a trans woman.
What if I do the hormones? Because that does change you. It changes your personality, your voice, and so on. What if I get the operation? Yeah. So I get my wee like lobbed off, and it turns into a vag.
Then that means that you're a dude who chopped off your dick. Sorry.
So you're saying that trans is fake. It doesn't really exist.
It's cosplaying.
You're
biologically You're saying it's bullshit.
Yes.
So this is where. Hold on.
Let me just say this. Let me just say this.
We're going to say things.
Because y'all got to put me back into producer land before the guest goes up, because I'm going to blow the whole damn show up. Okay, so let me just get this out real quick.
You're not. Yeah, we're not. Don't loosen the hounds.
Yeah, no. I mean, for 7,000 years of human history, it's been relatively. You can say for the majority of that time that sex and gender have been the same. There's not really been any kind of differentiation between that until about 5 minutes ago. True. So how about we just keep the totality of human history? And last thing I'm going to say on this: if you cannot accept yourself, then why the dusty hell should I accept you whenever you tell me that what you want to be? Whenever you can't accept what the hell you even are when you popped out of your mama's. When you popped out of your mama, that's a you problem.
I'll answer that question, because what they would say is, by transitioning, I now have become myself, and now I am myself. So please accept my new real self.
Your mental illness is not my problem. Sorry.
And by the way,
Robbie. I know he was dying to get that out.
Of human history argument that falls apart when you consider that slavery was part of human history for 99% of human history.
Yeah, and it still is. Go
to Libya. That's not a biological
thing. You can buy yourself a brand spanking new African right now in Libya.
That's true.
Ooh.
That is not.
I've always wanted my own slave.
That is not wrong either. Okay,
it's like someone to clean out Clovis's litter box.
Oh my God.
Okay, I'm gonna go wait for the guest comes, because I will blow this whole damn show up. Bye.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you. All right. So so I'm maybe not as extreme as Robbie, but to your question, Ted, about about
what should the trans woman do or the trans
if you
man
got
do?
it. Well, for example, if you got it
Where do
chopped
they
off
fit?
or whatever,
Mhm.
if you got it chopped off or whatever, that's where the downstream consequences of this UK ruling is. That's where the rubber meets the road,
And
right?
everything's
So let's
really
say
downstream once you get it lobbed off.
that's true. I peed on a mountain in Iceland, remember? So it's difficult. So when this happens, if a person chops off their junk,
Mhm.
presents as what society defines as a woman, because you know, if a woman is merely defined as having long hair and wearing lipstick, then I only have 50% of that going on, Ted.
Right, sure.
But now the UK court has defined biologically what it is. So, okay, fine. I can go into a woman's restroom, even though I like wearing boys' clothes. You know, I wear Vans and Chucks, and you know, so
there's nothing unusual about women wearing men's clothes.
I agree. So this is where it kind of gets messy, and I'd be curious to see where the UK courts go with this, especially in the way that you presented it, Ted. If a trans woman has gone through all the procedures, right? Gone through the hormone therapy, gone through the whole, you know, surgeries, bottom surgeries, top surgeries, whatever. At which point can they then go into the women's restroom in the UK? That that is a sticky wicket, and they're going to have to figure that out. But they are the first, I would say, in a Western democracy to come down with this ruling. And
is that true?
The U.S. Yeah, in a Western democracy, yeah. The French have it. There's been no Supreme Court ruling in France, or I don't even know if they call it a Supreme Court in France.
Yeah, it is a Supreme Court
in a Western.
France.
It is precedent setting for Western democracies. So I'm curious to see what that's going to look like across other democracies, like here in the U.S., if we still have a democracy in a few years. So we'll see. But our guest is in. I see our guest has popped.
We have a quick ad to read before we bring our guest. So
we do. We have an ad to read.
Yeah, I'll read that as soon as Robbie puts
that going to
up
be
the
you,
text
Ted?
here. I'll read it. Yeah, I'll read it.
All right.
In the meantime, I guess we could go. Well, yeah, let's go ahead and introduce the guest. So we're talking about.
You should do the ad read.
Well, I'm waiting for the text. So.
Oh, we're waiting for that. But anyway,
Here we go. All right, here we go. Okay. I'll read it right now. All right, here we go. Off to the races. Week coffee is for the weekend at Rumble. Week has never been part of the mission. No fillers, no fraud, and no settling for mediocrity. Just like 1775 coffee. It's single origin, small farm, hand-picked, specialty grade coffee that stands for quality, free speech, and calling out BS when it matters. Forget stale, mass-produced beans, roasted just enough to hide the flaws. Dark roast hits like a Trump tariff. Medium roast keeps it bold without the bitterness. And Vitality Mushroom Blend, real energy and lasting focus, no synthetic garbage. For F-Cup pods, whole bean, or fresh ground coffee, go to 1775coffee.com. Use code STUDIO for 15% off and start your morning with coffee that stands for something. Oh, and every dollar spent enters you to win a Cybertruck and $30,000 in cash. All right, let's move on to our guest here.
Cool. Let's hit the jaws.
Let's just go ahead and introduce our guest, and we can get into straight into the conversation. Our guest is Allen Orr. He's an immigration attorney and the vice president of the American Immigration Lawyers Association. Allen, thank you so much for joining us here on the TMI show.
Thank you for having me. So it's been a little while since we talked. I forget what the press was, but I am now a former president. I've graduated from being vice president to president, and now I'm a former president. So no big deal. No problem. Yeah. Thank you. So that time. That time on the court is over. I get to sit in the executive committee now and sort of reign supreme.
Nice.
Oh,
congratulations.
So that shows your bona fides on this topic, I would say. I mean, for the whole, immigration attorneys association. So I'm sure you've been on top of all of this, Allen. And by the way, I miss talking to you. I haven't seen you in a long time. I'm so grateful for you to join us. There are so many cases to get to. I'm sure that you are swamped right now. It's just madness happening across the United States. But can we clear up one thing first? Like let's just put a baseline out there. Do immigrants, whether they have papers or not, do immigrants, whatever their status may be, are immigrants afforded First Amendment constitutional rights of free speech?
So, yes, I mean, that's what the challenge is right now. The courts, or the administration, is trying to redefine what those rights are, and that will be decided in court. And hopefully the Constitution will stand. I think one of the issues, to sort of sum this up in a greater way, is that we have these three different branches of government, and Congress makes the laws, the executive branch enforces the laws, and then we have the judicial branch that decides if it is constitutional or not. This executive branch is under the belief that their election gives them the power to change the Constitution, which it does not, right? It gives them the power to enact their policies, but they don't get to rewrite the Constitution. No person elected in this country gets to rewrite the Constitution unless they go through the process of rewriting the Constitution and taking away those rights. And that's the challenge. And the challenge with that is this administration feels they have a mandate to do things, but they don't want to follow the Constitution. Substantively, meaning someone's First Amendment right, or procedurally, meaning just due process. I think deportations have happened in this country, whether you be Republican or Democrat, for a long time. The issue is, what safeguards do we have in place to ensure that someone's not inappropriately removed? In the past, the posture of this country has always been, it's better to have someone here that should have been removed, but we follow the right procedure, than to remove someone who should not have been removed because we didn't follow the right procedure. And that's where we are today.
That's exactly where we are today, with specifically in reference to Abrego Garcia, who, as it turns out, is not a member, or at least there's not enough evidence to say that he is actually a member of MS-13, which I think the Trump administration declared a terrorist organization. And on those grounds, scooped up all of these people and sent them to
without due process.
Without due process.
That's the thing. Is the New York Times did a dig into Dive, probably something the administration should have done, and they found that probably only about 30 of them may have had gang affiliations at all, out of 238. That's pretty piss poor. But even I think it's also important to note that even if you're covered with MS-13 tattoos and you look scary as shit, you still have constitutional rights, and you're still entitled to due process. And we can't start judging people by their tattoos and their there should be a process.
That's right. Or their past, right? Or
outsourcing them to a third country to warehouse them. What do you make of the case of Kilmar Albrego Garcia? Obviously the administration up until Tuesday admitted freely that he was mistakenly, as a result of an administrative error, as they put it, deported to the Supermax private prison there in El Salvador. So he shouldn't be there. We all agree on this, right? Okay, the U.S. Supreme Court has said, bring him back. I mean, okay, I'm simplifying, but they basically said the spirit is we want him back. They're dragging their feet. They clearly don't want him back. They're screwing around, at press conferences with the president of El Salvador. They're cracking jokes about it. They're being too cute by half. What is this really about? Why don't they want to bring him back? Are they trying to establish the precedent that we don't have to follow the courts? Is that what this is about? It's a power, it's a flex, or is it, or are they actually, or is the guy dead, or are they worried about something? I mean, there's obviously a hidden agenda here. What is it?
So legally, let's start with the first legal agenda from immigration attorneys. If they bring him back, then they can bring others back. That's number one. And it sets the precedence for all the other people who were removed without precedence to sort of bring them back. Number two, with the Supreme Court right now, they're trying to dance around the lines a little bit, right? Because we don't need that constitutional crisis this early in this administration when they have so many other things they want to accomplish. But what they've just sort of done is they've upended the use of the Aliens Removal Act, right? Because it proves that there's detrimental harm if you remove someone without having due process. So now you're not going to be able to use that anymore to sort of do the summation of these moves. Although we saw 10 people who were removed last weekend, apparently one of them was a teenager who was not a member of a gang again. But the courts are not going to weigh highly on that. In addition to that, the courts, unlike Congress, many of them who are elected or not elected, installed for life, don't have the same concerns that congressional people have with regards to the power of the current president to them remain in office or how they viewed within the party. We have seen Pew Research say We don't have a problem, and I don't either have a problem with removing people from the United States as long as you follow due process.
Mm-hmm.
What this president and what this administration is trying to do right now is say they're so strong that we can take over Canada and Greenland without any relationship with them, but we can't bring one person back from El Salvador when we paid them $6 million. They're under contract from us, and we have a friendly relationship where we can come in the White House and touch toes, and he's not even in a suit, right? So that doesn't sort of balance out to what he's trying to say and trying to move forward. The other reason that they don't want to bring him back is because he is a talking liability in so many ways. There are a ton of civil suits that should be filed against all these people saying he's a member of a gang that's not a gang, these public policy sort of civil reactions that I'm sure his wife's going to look at some point. But if he comes back, he's someone who can say, this is what's happening over there. And around the world, there's already been a lot of talks about human rights violations, food, housing, just general health care. And so that's another concern they have, is that, as in all cases, we say in these criminal cases, someone who is silenced cannot tell you the story of what is really happening.
Well, let me steal from Pirates of the Caribbean, right? Dead men tell no tales.
Yes.
So that's probably the easiest way to go. Now, Ted and I had been speculating that this guy, Stephen Miller, right? He's the deputy chief of staff. We suspect that this immigration stuff, this sounds very Stephen Miller-esque, and he's probably the one, orchestrating all of this behind the scenes. So he's talking to the press here yesterday outside of the White House, or 2 days ago outside of the White House. And the press asked him, so well, I'll let you hear it. But to me, it sounded like the reporters that were there are undereducated about the topic, and specifically about Kilmar Abrego Garcia's case, that they didn't know how to push back on Stephen Miller. So have a listen.
My question is, how do you know that he's a member of MS-13? The White House repeatedly said, according to intelligence.
According to, by the way,
Member of MS-13. And then here's how he replies.
with our government and his government. In other words, his government has confirmed based on their own intelligence that he's a member of MS-13. First of all, do you dispute that he's an illegal alien?
What's that?
Do you dispute that he's an illegal alien?
No.
Okay. And do you dispute that as an illegal alien, we have the right to deport him?
He's going through the
If he went through the legal process. So I want to be very, what I'm getting from this conversation, which is educational for me, is that not one person in the media knows the difference between a deportation order and a withholding order. Is that a fair statement? You're learning about this all for the first time right now? I guess so. Okay. So the deportation order means the judge has said he must be deported from the country. He has no right to remain here any longer. He must be removed from the country. So his only options are to be deported to his home country or another country. That's it. There's no other option. He doesn't get to stay here. He doesn't get to live here. He has no future here. He has no right to be here. He's an illegal alien. So when you keep saying return, because you've been spun up by the open borders advocates, you all seem to be operating under the illusion that he would be able to come to the United States and just continue to live here illegally. That's not an option available to him.
Well, okay. So first,
he
you
lied.
say that the reporter didn't know how to push back, but the point is, Abrego Garcia went through the TPS program and was technically because of that, technically had papers. He was allowed to be here. And his wife is an American citizen, and he has American children, U.S. born children. And obviously he's not the only.
Quite to the contrary of what Miller says, right?
Right.
A judge has ordered that he remain here.
The order that he cannot be removed to El Salvador specifically. So
right.
in the withholding, he can be removed to that country specifically. So I think there's a lot. So Stephen Miller, this is a Stephen Miller specialty. Anything before the 1950s that's enacted in immigration, such as this Alien Removals Act, child separation, all those things are right who he is. And that's, he's spent years trying to think about these things. But what he is not an attorney. He's not an immigration expert, right, in any capacity. He's not running DHS, right? So those things sort of speak to you as to why he's where he is. He's also not the chief advisor, right? Susan Weil is, who worked for Jack Kemp, who I'm a little bit disappointed in because she also worked for Ronald Reagan, and this wasn't Reagan's view of immigrants. But anyway, that being a side point, in this case, in 2019, when we had a President Trump, Mr. Garcia went through the immigration process in the immigration system. The immigration courts are part of the Department of Justice. ICE is part of the Department of Justice. They all are within it. It's an administrative hearing. It's an administrative court. In 2019, the Trump administration, because he was president, through his Department of Justice, through an immigration judge, said, listen, okay, we're not going to settle these facts about MS-13, but we're not going to remove you because we know if we remove you to that country, you have a serious problem that you may die in that country. And that's not what we do, which is our contract against torture, right? And then they let him exist in this country. He had a work authorization. He had children. He was living his life, right? And then they decide sometime later to remove him. There is a procedure for removing somebody who has withholding of removal. It requires due process and a current crime. That does not exist. They did not follow the process. So that's the part that Stephen Miller left out. And even if an immigration court decides to remove you, you still can appeal to a federal court. So an immigration court is not the last word. They're the last word on immigration. They're not the last word on the Constitution. It's someone's right to
this is like the Mahmoud Khalil case, right? Exactly. Where the immigration judge in Louisiana ruled against him, but he currently has an appeal pending in New Jersey, right, in federal court.
That's right, about his constitutional rights.
Right.
And we should not have expected that immigration judge. We could have expected, hopefully, but the judge did what the judge needed to do to remain in Department of Justice, because when this administration moved in, the very first thing they started doing was what? Firing immigration judges, firing the top immigration officials. So that's sort of, when you start seeing that sort of firing process across the board, specifically with judges, it sort of speaks to the nature, and saying that they are, idealists, speaks to the nature of you're trying to undermine our system. We have undermined so far Congress because we don't see Republicans being this. I mean, there used to be, I was once Republican, and you don't even see the division of the Republican Party anymore with regards to the budget spending, with regards to local rules, with regards to the foundation of the Republican Party. It seems that the mandate now is the federal government controls local government, and that's it. The Republican Party I was a member of would never say to a local jurisdiction, you need to do X and Y because we think you need to do it. They would say, you're the people, you decide what goes best for you. Don't ask us for the tax dollars, you carry it out in your own way. That would be that sort of sense to me. Congress has been ineffective in passing immigration law for the last 20 years, and they're ineffective in this moment. The only thing we have left is judiciary. And while judges are definitely appointed and selected in a political process, they all look at the same law, and they all have a variance of the same range of opinions when there's a little bit of variance based on the facts. But because I'm a lawyer and I'm a member of the Supreme Court, I've never felt so challenged to say, now the courts are political. No one ever used to walk in a courtroom and say, who appointed this judge? No one ever had that concept before. They would look at the ruling and say, there's some good, there's some bad. In that instant case with that judge, he had voted, he's the person who kept Trump's tax returns from being released, right, in one case. And now he's also the person who's looking to see if this person got their due process before they were moved to a detention facility. Addition to all of that, the cost, because that's something that I really used to enjoy about the Republican Party. It was not about wasteful spending of money. We're spending millions of dollars on a fiction, arresting people without due process, holding them and being requireable and having liability, rather than saying, okay, let's do the due process system. Let them take care of themselves. Let them feed themselves, not have the liability of their health care, not have the militarization at the southern border when you don't have anybody coming through, right? And as we saw, we had 2 people who were in an accident who passed there. And I'm not exactly sure of those facts just yet, but still, why do we have the national military at the southern border when they don't want to be there? They can't arrest anyone there, and it's costing us millions of dollars daily.
About Abrego Garcia,
Sure.
Yesterday, I think it's fair to describe the federal judge basically reamed the Trump administration for disobeying her clear and direct order. She said that the administration hasn't done anything. They haven't requested that he be returned to the United States. They haven't done anything. Then basically they were ordered to do to facilitate, basically do what you can, right? And obviously we know that the Salvadorians would return him upon request immediately. So this is the process now looks like for the next week or two, she's going to be allowing depositions of the administration. That's going to put them on the hot seat. Then she's going to rule against them, obviously, and find them in contempt. This is going to go to the federal appellate court, which probably will agree. And this goes back to the Supremes, who kind of punted the first time around, but they can't punt the second time. They've got to rule. And basically, they're between a rock and a hard place. They've either got to do something that they don't like to do, which is to curb executive prerogatives, and they don't like to do that at all, or they're going to have to say they're going to have to tell Donald Trump and the DOJ what to do. with this about this guy and bring him and curb those powers. How do you think they're going to rule?
So you might not have to go all the way past the contempt first, because I'm expecting at any moment there's going to be a filing saying that we don't have to do these dispositions because of national security. And they're going to ask the Supreme Court to grant that for the federal judge. So that may be the first battle to see whether the Supreme Court says, no, you do, and you should. And we were clear and we gave you a softball and you chose the opposite of what we said. And so now we're not going to turn against the courts, because if the Supreme Court turns against the federal court, they are undermining their own authority in that jurisdiction. And it is the demise of the court system in general, because then why even go to court? Who cares what the court says, right? And I think there are a lot of senators who may not say that in front of the camera. Many of them are lawyers, may not say that in front of the camera, but behind the camera they will. That's why I'm a little bit disappointed in Pam Bondi, because when we talk about, Mr. Khalil's case, there were people who were in the courtroom. Well, no, even Mr. Garcia's case, the lawyers from the Department of Justice, right? In the Garcia case, 2 of them were put on administrative leave. And yesterday, one of them was fired because they were in the courtroom telling the truth, saying, my client didn't follow the rules. My client hasn't answered my own questions. And they work for the same government, right? So you see this confusion with even in the ICE removal attorney sort of saying, this isn't how this process works. This is what we generally do. And because I'm a member of a bar, I can't walk into a courtroom and lie and say that we did something that we didn't do, or that I have the answers that I don't have. And Pam Bondi's response to that was, oh, they should have zealously represented the government. With what? There were no facts, right? There's no evidence. Right. And so all that stuff causes a confusion and an imbalance, and it makes the American people think, well, then what is justice here, right? And as we get ready to celebrate this country, which is a very young country, right? We're about to find out exactly how young we are, because I think, even in another arena in response to the tariffs, where the Chinese said, we've been around for thousands of years. You've been around 200 of them. Let's see what works out, right? So I think, it is a challenge in a flex belt, but I hope politically, Susan Wiles or some of the more balanced people in the government says, this is not a line we need 100 days into this administration, because it will put you up for impeachment. And it will be hard for these people in the midterms to get reelected if they let a president get elected and redo the Constitution without following the guidelines that are in the Constitution.
That right there
undermines all of government.
And then also, and I know this might be maybe something that's a little hot to talk about, and if you don't want to, I totally respect it. But I've got to be thinking that there's a possible, I feel like the administration is setting up possibility of violent confrontations between ICE and members of the community. These guys are, I'm a New Yorker. If I walk in the street and guys who are dressed randomly, wearing face masks, no badge, no uniform, no ID, no business card, in an unmarked car, try to bundle me up and throw me in there, and I'm going to resist, and I'm going to think that they're attacking me and they're going to kill me. And it's like, okay, so that hasn't happened yet, but there's already
it's happened. It's happened. There's video of people
right there.
Of interaction of people being, accosted in the car, breaking in windows, things for people who are, let me ask this question, or let me propose this question to people who are listening. Is it the worst of the worst individuals who are going to a job, working some minimum wage job, have some kids, where they are, where to find them, they're in the streets? That to me doesn't seem like they're the worst of the worst. You're not seeing them pull people out of gang meetings or in gang activities. You're seeing them at the pizza shop arresting people.
Dinner.
You're seeing people walking down the street getting arrested.
Or in this case, this woman, Tufts University PhD student.
Yeah.
She was out to dinner.
Yeah. So during Ramadan. So I think, and then you don't give her the medication that she needs. All these things are just liabilities that the government's going to be sued for later as they sort through them. But that confrontation already exists. This police Gestapo sort of talk is already there. I don't know if you saw the Marjorie Taylor Greene hearing where they were tasing people, right? That extremity and that level of discontent already exists within our government. And that's something that we're unable to move away from, because no longer has this nation had an election and then come back together for the sake of the people. We are in these camps don't fulfill the need of the American people, right? This is a division in which we eat ourselves up by constantly being in conflict, rather than saying, okay, what's the best plan for the American people? And then making a compromise on it. That's what Congress was to me as a young American, to say, okay, people have these different ideals. We'll take a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Let's try it and see what goes forward. Unfortunately, nobody did anything on immigration. it has been a winning button for the Trump administration twice. And I think this is important to say. There was a President Trump before. What did he do on immigration? He didn't remove a lot of people. He didn't do these extremities before. So he has been president before. He did not get an immigration bill passed when he said he was going to get an immigration bill passed. He comes in again. He still doesn't have an immigration bill passed. So any of these executive orders can be overturned by the next president that comes into office. So there's nothing lasting about it. So you're not fixing immigration. You're aggravating immigration.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean,
would you say we're in a constitutional crisis because of this, Alan?
So I think people see it that way. I think this is a growth. I mean, we've never had a leader like this. And like I said, we're 200 years in. But I will say, I have been informed of this wonderful story about President Nixon and, winning 54 states, being elected by this overwhelming majority, still didn't give him the right to go in and do whatever the hell he wanted to do. So our history presents to us evidence and factually wise that winning an election doesn't mean that you get to turn over the Constitution based on our history of this country.
Well, Richard Nixon, for all of his many flaws, respected the system in the end, right? He was willing to bend things, but he wasn't willing to break things. Yeah, I mean, in New York, where, Mahmoud Khalil was arrested by these goons, we have a law that's signed by Kathy Hochul. And that requires law enforcement agencies to present ID before they apprehend anyone. How come ICE isn't required to follow that law in New York?
I think they are. So we're seeing states generals figure out exactly what the next move is from some of the blue states with regards to suing the federal government, because that's also a match. Is it time to challenge the union, right? Because California has been ahead of that, sort of saying, should we be our own? Because we have the economics, the money comes from here. So I think people are thinking about the right procedure to do that, and in the right mechanism to do that. But I think in that case with Khalil, in front of his pregnant wife, they knew where he was living. They knew the time front. They said he was a student. He was a green card holder. All of these things to a nice officer who works for the Department of Justice are known facilities to them, right? They could have asked him to come in. This is nothing but political theater. And I think that's the issue that people have right now, is that we're back to this weapons of mass destruction being somewhere where we scare people into action and we never show them anything. You just got to trust me. There's a boogeyman over there and I'm saving you from that boogeyman, because these people aren't doing that. And factually to me is these people have been here for 10 to 20 years and none of them have a criminal record that you can just present to me and show to me today. And the only thing you say, specifically in Khalil's case, because I think this is super important about retroactivity of law, Khalil and all of those others were dealing with an issue in time in 2024 before there was a President Trump. President Trump came to office. He made his executive announcement, which sort of put forth what the law should be going forward. They are prosecuting, not even prosecuting, they are indicting people on things they did in the past, retroactivity of law, when it was not a problem to be in this country. And that is problematic for everyone. Because if I can come look at you and say, you know what, when you were in high school, you did this, you're guilty for this now.
Right.
Now's the law today, you go to jail.
But what about that law that, that sort of McCarthy era law that Rubio keeps citing that basically says, the the Secretary of State can just sort of decide, like, first of all, this is the first I ever heard that the United States had a foreign policy based on fighting anti-Semitism. Have you guys ever heard of that? I never heard of that. And so it's like, on our longstanding anti-Semitism thing that we never talked about ever before. But it's basically it's a very vaguely, Mary Trump, right? Trump's niece. When she was a judge, she had ruled that she believed this law was unconstitutionally vague. That makes sense to me, right? Because one of the principles of the law is that you have to be able to understand it so that you can follow it. And if it's so vague that as to be meaningless, or, basically the Secretary of State can define it to mean, this is the foreign policy interests of the United States to be anything you want. I mean, how can anybody do anything, right? I mean,
so another Stephen Miller special. I'm sure that they found this in the dark magic box and pulled it out and said, "This is what we're going to use." And what it does, it gives Congress a format to now know what they need to sort of address and say, "This isn't what the law is anymore," because there are a lot of laws on the books. People seeing me know I'm Black, but other people who might not, you may not know that I'm Black. So a lot of these challenges of birthright citizenship have really installed in a lot of people who, like myself, are Black and born here, who have concerns about when does citizenry start, this alien registration, this sort of denaturalization of defining who the citizen is, right? The SAVE Act, what documents you need to do, say the Real ID Act, which has been sort of floating around for years. All of a sudden now you have to have a passport to get to this place or that place, and it needs to match your maiden name, and all these other sort of complexities of weaving people out of the democracy of saying you're not really a citizen, right? It's sort of another class,
like the Nisei, like the Japanese Americans in World War II.
Absolutely. And that's problematic. And if people don't see it that way, that's the problem, because most of the times you don't see it that way because it does not impact you. And that's what we found from a little bit of these people.
Speaking of impacting me as an as a born in Massachusetts, cisgendered white dude who went to Columbia, Trump was asked, hey, do you want to deport Americans, U.S. citizens born in the U.S. to El Salvador? He's like, yeah, we're looking into it. Is he just talking shit, or does he mean that?
People want to say he's talking stuff, but I'm an immigration lawyer. There's nowhere in the Immigration Act where you can deport American citizens. So,
but you can't really deport. You can't really keep a guy deported in a private prison either. But when a court told you not to, right?
Is there anything that specifically says you cannot deport American citizens?
So there again is the boogeyman, right? You can't make all the negatives of something. You can only say what the positives are, what exists in law. So you can't sort of have that sort of written out everywhere you can't. Oh, they didn't say I can't. Well, guess what? You can't, because you can't. It doesn't say you can either, right? So
Simon says
with that sort of level of law, but no, you cannot. I mean, we've had this experience. We've even talked about people at Gitmo before. So
yes,
we've had this conversation. It did not work out well. McCarthyism didn't work out well. After 9/11, all that stuff didn't work out well. And what really is the troubling part of it is it does not solve for the problem that you're going for. Removing individuals from this country who believe a certain way does not kill that thought or pattern. It only infuses it in other people to sort of say, okay, now we really see who the enemy is.
Yeah. And we'll probably make that the last word. I want to be respectful.
Can I ask you one question? My understanding is that there's a law, like if I knew that one of my friends was being sought by ICE, was an undocumented worker, and I said, "Oh, you can hide out at my place. You can be my Anne Frank." That's illegal. I'd be breaking the law. Is that true?
It is true. Right now, this last weekend, they've done some cases where they were rounding up people in Las Vegas, and they were charging people who were giving them shelter with harboring.
Wow.
And so, what I ask you in this moment is, well, if they're harboring, what are their employers doing? Where are those big prison cells going? When are those trucks coming around? When is the CEO? When is that manager going to jail? When
is Steve Wynn? When is Steve Wynn going to get charged?
When's Tyson Chicken going to go to jail?
Right. And pay the money and pay them the restitution they probably deserve because they're not getting the Social Security tax. They don't get all these other things. Where's that restitution?
Excellent point. Jeez, just so many moving parts. I never expected all of this to happen in fewer than 100 days.
Nobody, and that's one of the great, not great, but one of the challenging moves of this Trump administration. They came in ready to move this time because they know it would be short, and I think they picked the wrong day to sort of decide, because they could have just brought Mr. Garcia back. It could have been long overdue, done, moved away. Now it's a huge media story. It's the court, and it just challenges everything else they want to do. Yesterday I said, I don't know if you know this. Yesterday is the day the Titanic hit the iceberg. And I think that's the exact same thing with the Trump movement. It just hit the iceberg, and so
and the polls are sinking fast.
Right, because the money isn't there. The eggs are still expensive. Gas may be 10 cents cheaper somewhere, but you don't have a job, right? All this. It's funny to me that people don't know how democracy works and how they keep saying Trump dollars, but they're really tax dollars. Trump has no money he's giving to us. These are money that are taxed for the people giving back to these areas. And so you gather all the money and you redistribute it for the good of the people by employing people. Unemploying those people also add to unemployment in all these areas. And specifically when there are places where there is only the government that we've seen in Alabama. What, you voted against your own job?
Absolutely. Allen Orr, love hearing you and having your insights here.
Totally.
Thank you so much. We're updating this now. Allen Orr is an immigration attorney and the president of the American Immigration Lawyers.
Sorry, former president.
In that time, I already missed that time that you were former. Okay. Well, you got your promotion, and he's the
once a president, always a president.
That's right.
That's the case with immigration law, right? That's
we call you Mr. President. Allen Orr, thank you so much. Love having you. Hope you'll come back again soon.
Thank you.
I will. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you. Allen is great. Obviously, he's super busy right now
and very knowledgeable. Yeah, no, he's really, he helped. He answered a lot of questions that I had.
Yeah, very, I mean, prescient topic. Because,
I do think we're going to need that level of civil disobedience, though. I mean, can you imagine if
I did
hundreds of thousands of Americans were to agree to take in their undocumented neighbors and were willing to subject themselves to arrest? This whole thing would fall apart.
Or what if here, I'll go one step further, Ted. What if you didn't know? Like, for someone like me, I grew up in Los Angeles. Everybody's Latino. I don't go around asking my friends what their parents or their immigration status is. What if one of them asked me, if I still live back home, one of them asked me, like, hey, I need a place to crash for a while. I'm getting my life together or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, you can crash on my couch. I got a spare room, sure. And now I'm complicit in harboring because I never asked for my friend's immigration status. Like, that's how slippery the slope is, right? I mean, you can accidentally.
I don't think like failure to get the information exposes you legally. But if you know, let's say, you tell me, oh, by the way, Ted, I'm not really an American citizen. And
I'm not really supposed to be.
And it's okay. Actually, I can know that. I'm still not exposed. But if I say, don't worry, here, I'll send you some money. I'll give you, or you can stay at my place. Or if ICE comes by, hey, have you seen Manila? And I'm like, no, I don't know anything. I don't know any Manila. That's where I get exposed.
Well,
that's harboring.
I think it's a slippery slope that if they can twist up stories on all of these certain individuals, and you know me, I'm not a fan of open borders, but I'm also for the due process that we have established in this country for at least for this particular topic, over 100 years, right? That we established that there is due process also for non-citizens, that it's applicable to them too, not just American citizens, especially after World War II with the Japanese internment camps.
No, if you're a human being and you're walking around in the United States, you are entitled to due process and the Bill of Rights.
If you're here in the United States.
You can be a criminal, doesn't matter. Right. You can be from overseas, no status whatsoever. Listen, Manila, we got a quick ad, so I'm just going to quick read through it. This sponsorship is from Rumble, one that's incredibly important to the survival of the company. When Rumble first started in 2013, they built the platform for the small creator. They didn't censor or have biases. They were fair and treated all creators equally. No one thought platforms would censor political conversation or censor opinions on COVID, but they did. Facebook admitted they fell to pressure from the Biden and Harris administration. Rumble did not. They held the line. They're attacked daily for giving us a voice to talk to you. They're attacked in corporate media. They're attacked by governments like France. They're attacked from brand advertisers who refuse to work with them. Corporate America is fighting to remove speech. Rumble is fighting to keep it. Rumble won't survive with brand advertisers. They don't get much of it. Watching our show on Rumble is the most they can ask from you. But if you really believe in this fight and you have the means, one major way you can help Rumble survive is by joining Rumble Premium. Join the community that believes in the First Amendment and believes in our human right to free speech. Rumble's offering $10 off with the promo code STUDIO. When you purchase an annual subscription, go to rumble.com/premium and use the promo code STUDIO. Like I said, if you have the means and believe in the cause, now is the time to join Rumble Premium. If you don't have the means, we're just happy if you watch us here on Rumble. All right, so we have one more story to read to go get to.
Yeah, one more a fun story, Ted, because yesterday was tax day, as we discussed. So let me go ahead and hit the jaws on that.
Yay. Okay, here we go. Gen Z is reviving a job that has generally been deemed boring by millennials and boomers, and it's helping them to land six-figure careers straight out of college. As millions of baby boomer CPAs gear up for retirement, the accountancy industry is facing a talent shortage crisis. While it's been often called one of the most boring jobs headed down the path towards extinction, Gen Z is going after those big six-figure Benjamins and gaining experience by helping individuals file their taxes for free. The IRS is on Doge's chopping block. The extension of tax cuts is up in the air, and accountants are so fed up with the stress that they're leaving the industry in droves. I can verify that. Some 340,000 accountants have already left their calculators behind and quit over the last 5 years. Of course, that also includes the pandemic. And some estimates suggest that 75% who are left are expected to retire within the next decade. So, for a field that is often considered the second most stereotypical boring job ever, the crisis couldn't get much worse, but Gen Z is coming to the rescue. Accounting is the science of the business world, according to Alana, third-year accounting and biohealth science major at Oregon State, who has helped dozens of families file their taxes this season as part of her school's volunteer income tax assistance program. One person was a goat farmer who only had a landline and no access to the web. Another was a young woman who was financially supporting her sister. Kelly was able to help them obtain a life-changing $6,000 back in refunds. One of Kelly's peers, Tristan Klaskias, a third year. Pardon?
I said not too shabby.
No, not at all. A third year studying accounting and finance helped an older lady get access to her much-needed Social Security income that she otherwise couldn't figure out. Kelly and Klaskias are just two examples of the Gen Zers who are increasingly viewing accounting not just as a monotonous chore, but as a way to transform lives. Their actions are already helping Americans save millions of bucks through free tax help through a partnership with the IRS and close to 2 dozen universities. So with Gen Z preferring job security over job flexibility, the shift to accounting may grow, especially with calls to decrease the barriers to becoming a certified public accountant, or a CPA, as I mentioned earlier. I guess I'm skeptical for one reason, which is AI. AI is definitely making tax preparation much easier. I used Grok to help prepare my taxes this year. It was much faster than usual. So you can put in a lot of your basic information into any AI scheme, and it'll cough up. It'll tell you. It'll just help you prepare your taxes a lot more quickly and efficiently. So I'm just wondering if AI may put a lot of CPAs out of business, or if it'll just become a tool that CPAs can use to process taxes more effectively and efficiently.
Well, look, Ted, we're eons away from the U.S. government actually having any meaningful reforms in the laws around our taxes and the rules. I mean, I don't think
there's no
our
hope.
lifetime.
There's no hope in sight. No.
I don't think that they're going to make any meaningful changes to the tax laws or tax codes while we're still alive. Maybe our children. I don't know. But that said, your son is a Gen Zer. And mine is an alpha.
He's not going into accountancy. That I promise you.
So here's
it would be
what
fine
I find,
with me, but he's not going to.
This is like a generational thing that you and I love to discuss, right? So the Gen Zers are now out of college. Like they're many, believe it or not, right?
Well,
like some of them, many of them are already out of college. The front half of the Gen Zs, they're out of college. So we're seeing more Gen Zers graduating with accounting and CPAs and whatever than generations past. Certainly,
there's one
way more than millennials.
And this is a job you can do at home. A lot of people do.
Right.
So,
but the thing is, the key word there was job stability. Because as you and I know, a lot of people generationally, what you choose to do as a grown up, right? You're shaped by what's happening in society around you. And I remember having this conversation. I think we were off camera. I'm pretty sure we're off camera. We weren't live on air yet, but I had this conversation with Larry King many years ago before Showtime. And Larry was joking to me about, being the child of Jewish immigrants to the U.S., and growing up poor I think it was Brooklyn. He was a big Brooklyn Dodgers fan, followed them all the way to L.A., right? And he was talking about how his parents were trying to pressure him to study accounting. And he said that it was a cultural thing for the Jewish community, obviously in his era, because it's stable. It goes with you wherever, you can travel with it. If you have this degree, you have, this kind of education, you'll always have a job, Larry. This is what you need to study. And this is what they were telling little Larry back then. Of course, he didn't choose that route.
Fortunately not.
Right. And he became, the cultural icon that he now is, legendary Larry King. But he said this was based on him growing up in the Depression era, and money was a big taboo topic, and that somebody needed to manage things for people, and that it was a generational thing. So for his generation, somebody that's a bean counter, certified bean counter, was important for his generation, and specifically to Jewish, being the child of Jewish immigrants to the US, that this was a thing for them, stability, because they had so much instability for thousands of years, right? Being, moved around, booted from country to country, that for a lot of Jewish people, this was a cultural thing for them. It became a part of their culture. And that's why you see so many, he said, this is why you have so many Jews in banking, so many Jews in accounting. So it's not this nefarious thing that I know a lot of people like to say, the Jews control everything.
Well, it's ironically a result of anti-Semitism, right? Because in the Middle Ages, Jews were often prohibited in Europe
in banking
not from banking, from lots of other jobs. And like from trades and crafts and stuff. So they were pushed into finance and money lending. And then ironically, nobody likes the person they owe money to. So that it basically, led to a lot of resentment, and it's part of the root of anti-Semitism.
Yeah. So this, it's not some weird global conspiracy. This is the fun conversation that I was having off air with Larry King. If you're tuning in late, it wasn't some weird global conspiracy that somehow all the Jews control the money and whatever. It's been a multi-generational thing, and it has proven to be a solid choice if it's a cultural thing among Jews, right? To go into this field. It's obviously, with a lot of prominent Jewish Americans running big banks like Jamie Dimon at Chase, right? At JP Morgan. So I think the interesting thing with the Gen Zers that are different than the generation just before them is the millennials, who are like, oh, I'm gonna take big gap years and travel the world, or I don't love this job, so I'm not gonna do it. So famously, millennials are the snowflakes, right? Famously. And especially the young millennials, they're known as snowflakes. So now you have Gen Zers rebounding from that and, going, I'm going to pick something, I'm going to go into a field that is going to be around in some shape, form, or another, because the U.S. laws, tax codes are not changing. I'm going to pick something stable that can travel with me. And I'm all for it. I'm not a numbers person. As soon as I see numbers, I'm like, I have a brain meltdown. So I'm so glad that that some Gen Zers are going to pick up my slack there, because this is not my thing. But to your point about AI, I'd be curious to see how much of a tool, like I'm going to be pissed. I'm paying, my Gen Z accountant 10 years from now, Ted, and all this idiot was doing was just using Grok. I'm going to be pretty pissed. I'm going to want my $500 back for doing my taxes.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm very curious about it. I don't know that it's got the long-term job security that maybe people think, Yeah,
but that's what they said about doctors, or at least your primary care physician, your PCP, about, with video calls coming in, like you're not going to need a doctor's office
That's
anymore.
Not the
you're
same.
not going to need.
A lot of people prefer the in-person experience. I'm one of them. Look, it depends. Obviously, it depends on what's wrong with me. But there are definitely times where I'm like, I need someone to actually put their eyes on me to know what's going on.
Can you check out this lump?
Yeah,
check out this lipoma back
Yeah.
here. Look, I think this is a great move. I'm so happy to see that a younger generation is actually not all deciding, I want to be a rap superstar. I want to be a basketball player. I want to be what is this? Influencer. I'm so happy to hear this.
I think
news.
influencers should be sent to that prison in El Salvador. Anyway, never to be seen again. Bye.
Super happy. Super happy to hear this news.
It's our new Guantanamo.
Send influencers there, please. But I'm very happy, and I'm curious to know what my son's generation, what that's going to look like, because they are native to AI.
Adrian in the chat points out something that I had kind of thought. Jamie Dimon's actually Eastern Orthodox. He's Greek.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
Oh,
he's,
okay.
he's
Thank
not.
you.
He's not Jewish. Yeah.
What's his, I'm blanking on his. So many big named heads of banks. Wow,
Well,
I am drawing blanks on.
Well, it doesn't matter. I mean, I know what you mean.
But you know,
yeah.
It is not a Jewish conspiracy. Was my point. It was like, oh, they all control all the banks. They do. Many of them are Jewish, and apparently not all of them, because Jamie Dimon is not.
Right, exactly.
So there you go. To my point. But
there's a lot of wasps. There's a lot of wasps running banking
there are
too.
A lot of wasps. But the point of this story that makes me very happy as a mom is that hopefully, because Gen Z is the generation right before my son, because he's Gen Alpha, that he will see by example that he will choose something, not like mom, mom who's a Gen Xer. It's like, this is what I love, man. I love journalism. I love reading and writing. And
well, we had that luxury. We were able to do that.
Is that, well, we're shaped by our society at the time, Ted.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
I wanted to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and these kids.
Did you see that article in the New York Times about, like, went viral about how everyone in Gen X feels like their career is over because they all went into media, magazines, and everything. And then it's like, everyone's like depressed. They're like, here we are in our 50s and we're fucked.
Yeah, but Gen X is known for being depressed. That is our era.
Well, we have reason to be depressed. We're always treated like shit.
That's our era. And then the millennials are the ones that are like, I'm going to pursue my passion. I'm going to take my job and do it from Phuket, Thailand. I'm going to, like, that's what they all did, right? And now the Gen Zers are like more practical, and maybe the Gen Alphas will even be more practical on top of that.
The Gen Zers and the Gen Alphas are going to have to. They're not going to be like doing accountancy. They're going to be building levees by the sea to keep the rising oceans out.
Maybe, but
they're all going to be wall builders, dams, walls.
Southern Wall, the Great Southern Wall of America. Robbie's going to nod his head because his kids are Gen Zers.
All right.
So, but it's good. Practical stuff. That's music to an Asian tiger mom's ears, Ted. That's all I'll say. Music. Love it. The Asian tiger mom is purring. All right, guys. That's going to do it for us. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll be back again tomorrow. We do. We have Caleb Maupin scheduled. We're going to talk about Iran. And see if we're not going to get into we averted nuclear disaster, I think, with Russia, but maybe not necessarily with Iran. Maybe. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, well,
maybe.
All right.
So we'll talk about that tomorrow.
Speaking of reasons to be depressed. All right.
Well, hopefully that gets averted too, because, Trump is the most peace president of our time.
Yes, he is.
Don't you know?
Of course.
Don't you know, Ted?
Peace-tastic. All right.
He is the peaciest. All right, that's going to do it, guys. We'll see you tomorrow. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe button wherever you are consuming this content. Ted in Manila, Audi 5000. Deuces.
Bye.